conversation with the US Speaker Mike Johnson as he visits the United Kingdom ahead of the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Of course, that was America's Brexit. And also tonight.
We are cracking down on free speech. Is this deeply felt within the Republican Party?
It is.
Speaker Johnson also weighs in on the huge brewing diplomatic row between the US and the UK over the erosion of freedom of speech and also the possibility of British government banning Elon Musk's X. And finally,
this man has to be our next Prime Minister because our country needs reform.
Yes, as a second senior Tory defects to Reform UK, we'll be looking at what this means for both Reform and the future of the Conservative Party. That is an action-packed show, and that's all to come. But first is your latest news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good evening to you. The top stories tonight at 7. Tariff threats are no way to treat allies. That is the warning from the Foreign Secretary tonight as tensions rise over Greenland. Yvette Cooper told MPs Greenland's future belongs to Greenlanders and Denmark alone, calling the threat from Donald Trump's tariffs completely wrong, unwarranted and counterproductive. She also said Arctic security must be handled through cooperation, not pressure, warning divisions only help adversaries. The comments come after Donald Trump said he would 100% impose sweeping tariffs unless a deal is reached, refusing to rule out force to seize the island. Here at home, meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer says Britain must not be forced to choose between the US and Europe.
Alliances endure because they're built on respect and partnership, not pressure. That is why I said the use of tariffs against allies is completely wrong. It is not the right way to resolve differences within an alliance. Such measures hurt British workers, British businesses, and the British economy. And that is why I've been so clear on this issue. A trade war is in no one's interest. And my job is always to act in the UK's national interest.
Also tonight, the former Chief Constable of West Midlands Police has now been referred to the police watchdog over the controversial ban on Israeli football fans. Craig Guilford has been reported to the Independent Office for Police Conduct by the local Police and Crime Commissioner after admitting he gave incorrect evidence to MPs, including denying the use of AI in intelligence gathering that led to the Maccabi Tel Aviv ban. Guilford retired on Friday after losing the confidence of the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, but critics say that doesn't go far enough. The Commissioner, Simon Foster, says the episode damaged public confidence and any potential misconduct must now be independently examined. In Spain, the death toll tonight continues to rise. Now 40 people known to have died and dozens more left injured after two high-speed trains collided in the south of the country in what officials say is the worst rail disaster there in more than a decade. One train derailed and crossed onto the opposite track, smashing into an oncoming service and forcing carriages into an embankment. Witnesses described the wreckage as a mangled mess, with 75 people still in hospital. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has declared 3 days of national mourning, vowing to uncover the cause of what he called a moment of pain and tragedy. Kemi Badenoch has called an emergency meeting of her party's right wing tonight after two MPs defected to Reform UK in the space of just days. The Conservative leader has summoned senior right-leaning Tory MPs following the departures of Robert Jenrick and Andrew Rosindell, warning others not to follow. In a letter to MPs, she says the defections are not about ideology but about character, insisting the Conservatives remain the party of the right. She also warned MPs and staff against briefing against the party, saying those who try to undermine it will be dealt with firmly. Ms Badenoch has played down the fallout, calling the defections just a minor setback, not a defining moment. And the legendary Italian fashion designer Valentino Garavani has died at the age of 93. Known around the world simply as Valentino, he passed away at his home in Rome, surrounded by his loved ones. Tributes are pouring in already for the pioneering designer, whose name, of course, became synonymous with Italian elegance. Those are the latest headlines. I'll have another roundup for you at 8.
Thank you, Sam. Hello, good evening and welcome to GB News Tonight with me, your host, Martin Daubney. Now, tonight we have a very, very special show for you.
But to have a US president threatening tariffs, unless we agree that he can take over Greenland by some means, without, it seems, even getting the consent of the people of Greenland, I mean, this is a very hostile act. There's no other way I can put it.
Yes, the president has a certain...
Yes, as the transatlantic alliance faces its toughest challenge yet. We'll bring you the Reform UK leader Nigel Farage's conversation with the US Speaker Mike Johnson as he visits the UK ahead of the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, and also on tonight's show.
We are cracking down on free speech. Is this deeply felt within the Republican Party?
It is.
Yes, Speaker Johnson also weighs in on the brewing and growing diplomatic row between the US and the UK over the erosion of freedom of speech and the possibility of the British government even banning Elon Musk's X. But first, it's been a truly astonishing week for Reform UK as they made this announcement last Thursday.
Britain is broken. Britain needs reform. And reform needs you.
And then there was the Andrew Rosendale announcement from over the weekend.
This man has to be our next Prime Minister because our country needs reform.
But could there be a turquoise tsunami? Because earlier this evening, Nigel Farage pledged that more defections are on the way, posting on X that Rosendale will not be the last MP to join Reform before his 7th of May deadline, after which no further defectors, he claims, will be accepted. Now, while the Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch has called a mass meeting of Tories this evening, we understand the Common Sense group, that's the Jenrick faithful, and indeed she has not been pulling any punches over Robert Jenrick.
The whole country has seen that this is a man who says whatever it is that he wants to say to get votes, and that's why he's gone to Reform. That's where he belongs. And what I want to do is actually stop talking about this psychodrama and start talking about what we're going to do to fix the country.
Well, there's a huge amount to discuss, and I'm joined now to discuss this by the political strategist James Frayne. James, welcome to the show. It's always a pleasure to have your company. There's calamity, there's chaos, and potentially there's a further wave of defections to come there, hinted by Nigel Farage. And, of course, Kemi Badenoch, we understand, at present in a meeting with the Common Sense group, trying to shore up these defections. Could this be terrible news for the Conservative Party?
I think it is terrible news. We've had a slightly odd few days, though, where quite a few Conservative commentators were suggesting that Kemi Badenoch had handled the whole affair very well, that the party was better off without Robert Jenrick. I mean, this is completely absurd. Robert Jenrick was by far the star performer of the Conservative Party over the course of the last 50 months or so since Kemi Badenoch was elected. It's a disaster that their top performer has left. And not only has he left, but he's left by saying that the Conservative Party did a terrible job in government. It's got no imagination in opposition. This is only going to chip away at the Conservative polling position, which is already in pretty dire straits as it is.
James Frayne, I did some analysis today with Electoral Calculus. Martin Baxter got the list through to me. And the fascinating point about those who have defected thus far, of course, that is Kruger, Rosendale and Jenrick. They're only the sort of 45th or below most likely to lose their seats in Reform UK. There are more than 40 MPs who are much likely to lose to Reform, some of them, including Richard Holden, top of the pops. There's an 86% likelihood to lose his seat to Reform UK, with a third of the entire Conservative room looking likely to be defeated by Reform UK. Could this just be the tip of the iceberg in terms of defections?
I think absolutely, definitely. I think if you were to be fair to Danny Kruger, to Robert Jenrick and to Andrew Rosendale, I think these have been very long-standing principal politicians on the right of the Conservative Party that, for example, certainly in Andrew Rosendale's case, certainly in Danny Kruger's case, were always very pro-Brexit, very in favour of low taxes and these sorts of things. So to some extent, Reform has become their natural home. That said, as you've suggested, there are many, many, many Conservative MPs that are looking at effectively redundancy at the next election. And I think increasingly Conservative MPs are going to be looking at their wafer-thin majorities and they're going to start jumping. Now, at the moment, the Conservative Party are, roughly speaking, 20 points in the polls. I think this is because many voters think they'll cut the party some slack, they'll see where the party looks like they are just before the next election. But if it looks like the Conservative Party are, if anything, going to impede a right-leaning government being elected, I would not be shocked if the Conservative Party very rapidly goes off a cliff because people decide that it's much more important to get a right-leaning politician into power than it is simply to do a, as it were, protest vote and vote for the Tories.
James Frayne, we've said for years now, particularly since the days of Brexit, it's been cruelly exposed in many senses. The Conservative Party is two parties. The liberal-leaning end of the Conservative Party, you might uncharitably call them the wets, and then the true Conservatives. The idea that the party should be purged of one wing or the other appealed to people in the Conservatives because they wanted the party, many of them, to go back to the right. And instead, we're seeing here perhaps the most cherished assets of the political right going to Reform UK. Could that give us a spectre of the remainder of the Remainer rump, pardon my phrase, of the Conservatives now being, as you say, more like the Lib Dems, and that's perilous for them?
Well, the way the country is heading is effectively towards a national government. We are looking like there's going to be a reform-led coalition supported by presumably scores of right-leaning Conservative MPs. I would assume that as that national government looks more likely, Nigel Farage will do a deal with those sympathetic right-leaning Tory MPs that he favours. That's where we're heading at this point in time. The sort of wet part of the party, as you call it, could it in fact be in the ascendancy after the next election? But you're talking of a party at that point of sub 50 seats. So, you know, there's been sort of a lot of jollity that people like Robert Jenrick have left the party, but they are going to be left with a very, very strange little lefty Lib Dem style Conservative Party.
And James Frayne, we here understand there is a meeting between Kemi Badenoch and the Common Sense Group this evening. Of course, Sir John Hayes heads that. He's high on the defection watch list. Of course, a rump of the Common Sense Group backed Robert Jenrick when he was trying to be leader. They are seen as the pro-Jenrick side of the Conservatives. If Kemi Badenoch reads them the riot act, it could have the opposite effect of consolidating the party. It could drive more away.
It could. I mean, but this is a slightly odd thing that Kemi Badenoch was viewed initially as being on the right of the party. It was one of the reasons why the grassroots voted her in. She seems to have talked herself into a slightly odd position recently where she's almost become a sort of left-leaning opponent of the reform tendency. That was never where she was. She was always viewed as being someone that was almost going to unite the right, if you like. So, yes, I could see that very easily rubbing people up the wrong way. You know, you know as well as I do, reading the riot act of politicians is an extremely dangerous game unless you are in an absolutely unassailably powerful position.
James Frayne, it's always fascinating to get your thoughts. Thank you very much for joining us tonight on GB News Tonight. I'm joined in the studio now by the journalist and the broadcaster Matthew Stadler. Matthew, welcome to Westminster. Always a pleasure to have your esteemed company. Well, it's all kicking off. What do you make of the last few days?
I'm astonished to hear James talk about Kemi Badenoch as being a lefty. I mean, that, I think, says a lot more about James's politics than it does about Kemi Badenoch's politics. Listen, I find this almost comical, the idea that Reform is supposed to be set up as an anti-establishment party, a breath of fresh air. It is the least breath of fresh air party that has ever been invented. Zia Yusuf, who's head of policy, for goodness sake, at Reform, keeps telling us, doesn't he, don't trust the Tories. And what does his leader, Nigel Farage, do? He stuffs Reform full of Tory MPs, either former MPs or a couple of current MPs. There's nothing fresh about this whatsoever. If you are one of those people who turned to Reform because you were fed up with the Conservative Party after 14 years and you didn't think Labour were getting it right, why on earth would you vote for the rump, and I would put it this way, the rump of the Tory party, who are migrating in desperation, mainly perhaps for their own careers? They keep talking about putting country before party, to reform. It is completely bonkers.
Well, you say that, but if you look at the voting metrics of the defectors thus far, in actual fact, Andrew Rosendale's seat is leaning Conservative at the moment. So is Robert Jenrick's seat. So is Andrew Rosendale's, Danny Kruger's, and indeed perhaps one of the next on the hit list, Suella Braverman. All those seats are leaning towards Conservative. These aren't rats jumping a sinking ship, as Ed Davey puts. They've actually got pretty safe Conservative seats, but doesn't that say more about them as strong Conservatives? And if you're going to plunder a party, you might as well take its best jewels.
They would presumably fear losing their seats either to reform at the next election or possibly, if the vote on the right is sufficiently split in their constituencies, maybe even to Labour. There is a toxic and vicious civil war playing out on the right of politics in our country at the moment.
There is on the left.
And Labour, as we all know, because we look at the polls,
hemorrhaging votes to Polanski,
are not doing well. We know that they've made some missteps. They've got 3 years to sort it out. But while Labour are struggling, the reaction of the right, and it's often been thus, is to tear themselves apart. Let's remember, and every single person watching your show this evening should know this, Nigel Farage said less than half a year ago, less than 6 months ago, that Robert Jenrick was not just a fraud, but someone he had always thought was a fraud. And what did Robert Jenrick say to Tory party members last year, according to The Telegraph? He said that Nigel Farage couldn't run a five-a-side football team.
That's politics.
You just say that's politics.
You often say disparaging things about your
this is not a game.
You do.
This is about the future of our country. How on earth are we supposed to trust a top team comprising of two men who have said those things about each other in such recent history? A fraud. Call someone a fraud, presumably meant a political fraud, not a criminal fraud. To call someone a fraud, that is a profound insult. And there's Nigel
Nobody
Farage
seems bothered about it.
Well, indeed, because they're prepared to debase and embarrass themselves.
Robert Jenrick isn't bothered about it. Nigel Farage isn't bothered about it. You clearly are.
Voters will be bothered about it, I would suggest.
You're rattled, because this could exacerbate the
rattled, they're rattled.
The left. Matthew Stadler, a great start of the show. Thank you very, very much indeed. Now, coming up in just a moment's time is what you've all been waiting for. Nigel Farage in conversation with the US Speaker, Mike Johnson.
We are cracking down on free speech. Is this deeply felt within the Republican Party?
It is.
The US Speaker will be weighing in on the brewing diplomatic row between the US and the UK over the erosion of freedom of speech and the possibility of the British government banning Elon Musk's X platform, and of course his view on the biggest threat to the transatlantic alliance in a generation. That's next.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain. He can say whatever he wants. A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country. There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor. Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Tonight with me, your host, Martin Daubney. Now, earlier on today, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage sat down in conversation with the Speaker of the US House of Representatives, the man second in line to the presidency. That is, of course, Mike Johnson. Now, their discussion ranged from the shared values underpinning the special relationship to the brewing diplomatic row of the UK's clampdown on free speech. And here's the first part of that magnificent conversation.
Well, I'm very pleased to be joined by the 56th Speaker of the US House of Representatives, Mike Johnson, who joins us here on GB News. Mike, welcome to our channel.
Great to be with you.
And we cover a lot of American politics, but there are one or two things that we don't fully understand and realise. Now, you're Speaker of the lower house, but it's quite a political function as well.
It is.
You've got to help the government get legislation through effectively. And the Republicans have a majority of?
Just one now. Down to one. The margin is one. It's quite a challenge. Speaker of the House in our constitutional order is one of only 3 offices listed in the Constitution. So you have the President, the Vice President, and the Speaker of the House. So in our system, it's a big role. It's an important role. You run the legislative agenda, but you're also in charge of not just policy, but the politics as well. And so you got to ensure that your majority is maintained, that everyone gets elected across our broad country, and you have to raise the money to get that done. So all those things happen simultaneously, and it's a lot to keep us busy.
When you came in as Speaker in chaotic circumstances, and we don't need to go into that, but how do you, I mean, the last 2 parliaments here have been big majorities, but there was a time during the Brexit years when votes were 3 votes this way, 4 votes that way. I mean, how do you maintain any sense of order? Because isn't the trouble that just a couple of your own members of your own party could get rid of you? How do you keep it together?
Well, a lot of prayer and patience, I say, is actually true. I have to work very closely with each of my colleagues. I have to know the dynamics of their districts and the people they represent, what their main priorities are. And as I often say, we'll never ask you to violate core principles, but you have to give up your preferences, because in a legislative body, that's the game. It's a team sport. So we do a very careful job of candidate recruitment. We try to get thoughtful, sensible people who want to come and govern in a conservative manner and lead the country forward. And I'm very pleased with the group. I genuinely love all my colleagues, even those who get frustrated sometimes. That's part of the process.
He's a diplomat, you can tell.
That's right.
Now, what the Brits don't understand, and you mentioned only 3 positions mentioned in the Constitution, but effectively, if something was to happen to the President, God forbid, and the Vice President, God forbid, you could be President of America this afternoon. That's right, isn't it?
It's true. It's never happened before. I don't expect it will happen now. What I try to do every day is focus on our job and our task. We have a lot to fix in America. In my view, and your view as a conservative, 4 years under the Biden administration were a disaster in terms of public policy for America. So we got a big mandate from the people in the 2024 election. President Trump got 75 million popular votes, a large number. We had our largest number, House Republicans, my party, in history. We got a mandate from the people to fix everything. So we had a very aggressive first year of the second Trump administration that we just wrapped up, an incredible record to run on. And we have our midterm elections coming up now in November. We've got to defy history to keep our majority, but I'm absolutely convinced that we will, because we have a lot to tell the people that we've kept our promises and we'll continue to do that.
Because, I mean, historically in America, halfway through a presidency, the president loses control of the House.
Yes.
and then government gets a bit stalemated.
That's right. In fact, it's only happened about twice in 90 years that a sitting president has picked up seats for his party in that first 2-year cycle, the midterm election. But we can do it. We're the group that defies expectation and makes
Well, we're all going to be watching, don't you worry.
Right.
Now, it's a big year. Yes. It's the 250th year of the Declaration of Independence.
Yes.
So it would be fair to say that our relationship between our two countries got off to a rocky start?
It did, but since then, and especially after World War II, we developed what we all refer to as the special relationship. And this partnership, this relationship between the UK and the US is critically important, not just for our countries, but of course for the entire world. A strong America is good for everyone around the world. A strong UK is as well, and we've recognized that. We have this common ancestry and heritage and our principles and values.
You seem to really feel this.
I do. I think it's important, and that's one of the reasons that I'm so excited to be here right now. I'll be the first U.S. Speaker of the House to address Parliament.
Yep.
It's a great honor to me, and the idea that it falls on our 250th anniversary is truly historic, and we're grateful.
And is it Speaker Lindsay Hoyle that's invited you?
Yes, we become fast friends. We meet annually at the G7 speakers meeting, which our colleagues from around the world come, and he is a great leader there, and become a fast friend. So I'm honored to have been invited.
Well, it's terrific. Now, I know everything you're going to say in the next few minutes will be in a personal capacity, not on behalf.
That's our legal disclaimer here. Yes.
No. Well, that at least means you can speak freely.
That's right.
So, just to begin with, I know you've got serious concerns about China and this new super embassy that we're on the verge of approving here in London. What are your concerns there?
Well, I've been clear. I don't want to meddle in the affairs of our friends here. Sure. You've got to make that decision. But to me, there's two different dynamics to it. There's the political side, which I'll leave to you all to address, but then there's the security side as well. And in America, we're constantly concerned about China, their aggression and what they do, for example, with the theft of intellectual property. I mean, just brazenly. And we know that they have intelligence efforts ongoing all the time. And it's not in our best interest. It's not in the UK's best interest. These are objective facts. And so the placement, we were hearing about the concern potentially about some of the fiber optics that are underground and all of that. I'm told, and we hear now, we've read by their intelligence services that is not as big of a concern as it might have seemed initially. But who knows? I just think we've got to be very guarded about China.
Just be watchful. Yeah. Now, one of the big rows that has sprung up, and I came to the House Judiciary Committee a few months ago, and I was there and cross-questioned for 3 hours, I think it was.
You did a fine job.
I mean, boy, they really go for it, don't they, up on Capitol Hill?
Yeah.
But the free speech debate is very, very real. There is an American perception, it seems to me, that somehow we're picking on Elon Musk, we are cracking down on free speech. Is this deeply felt within the Republican Party?
It is. It's one of our core principles. We believe in the free marketplace of ideas. My background is in constitutional law, and I used to actually litigate free speech cases, religious liberty cases in the courts, and of course in the court of public opinion. Look, our answer to offensive speech is not to censor and silence it, but to expand the free marketplace of ideas. The answer to disfavored speech is better speech, more speech. So as conservatives, that is our general philosophy, is that we don't want to just get in the business of government turning down the voices they disagree with, because it ultimately leads, in our view, to great harm. I mean, ultimately, let's be honest, it's the conservative viewpoints that are typically targeted by governments. The people who are freedom-minded and, the rugged individualists are the ones who keep government at bay.
But I mean, government ministers here are openly speculating about X being banned. Yeah. What would that do for our relationship?
I think it would be a detriment to the people of Great Britain and to the UK. Elon Musk is a friend. I've gotten to know him well over the last couple of years. I think he's acknowledged that there are constant improvements that could be made to his platform, but I think banning it is the wrong solution.
Yeah, he's not the easiest individual, is he?
He's a unique individual.
I've had a few ups and downs with him.
Yeah, we have. But, I mean, look, he and the president have made peace here in recent days, and they had been at odds a little bit. I thought it was important for those two titans to get back together because we don't need them at odds. And Elon is somebody who I respect and admire for what he's been able to achieve. And we can try to keep those relationships in a good place.
Yeah, they're a bit up and down.
Elon Musk, a unique individual, that's one way of putting it. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's the first part, but there's more to come after the break, including this.
But to have a US president threatening tariffs, unless we agree that he can take over Greenland by some means, without, it seems, even getting the consent of the people of Greenland. I mean, this is a very hostile act. There's no other way I can put it.
It's after the break. It's the big one. The transatlantic alliance is facing its toughest test yet, and we're bringing you Speaker Johnson's unfiltered take on that in just a moment. That's next.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Cloudy throughout tonight for most of us, some rain across northern areas, and by tomorrow morning it will become pretty windy across western areas. That's as an area of low pressure is developing out in the Atlantic. That will bring some strong winds into Tuesday, but before then a weakening weather front brings further outbreaks of rain to more northern areas into this evening. Some of these heavy at times, just turn a little bit drier and clearer for a time across Wales, southern parts of England too, with heavy bursts of rain continuing across Scotland. With clear skies pretty limited, frost is also going to be fairly limited to start Tuesday. Just the far north of Scotland could see temperatures just below zero, but a relatively mild start for the time of year to come for Tuesday. But the winds will strengthen. We could see gusts in excess of 65 miles per hour through Tuesday across parts of West Wales, Devon and Cornwall. A breezy picture elsewhere across the rest of the UK, but a brighter picture actually. Not entirely dry, still a few showers across parts of western Scotland, the far north as well, seeing some outbreaks of rain through Tuesday morning. But as we head towards lunchtime in the afternoon, I think there'll be more in the way of drier and brighter weather for many northern and eastern areas of the UK. It's actually a very different story for the west, as this area of low pressure starting to develop here will continue to bring further outbreaks of rain into parts of Wales, southwest England, Northern Ireland too, and those winds could bring some travel disruption to ferries as well as rail services as well. So please do check before you travel. Now, it's not going to feel too bad in the brightness in the east on Tuesday, but Wednesday, I think you will more likely be caught out in some rain. Outbreaks of heavy rain will push up from the south, bringing many of us a bit of a wet day on Wednesday. But it's across eastern areas of Scotland where we'll start to see the rainfall totals building up through the rest of this week. We do have a rainfall warning out already for these areas, as we could see as much as 120 millimetres of rain.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Tonight with me, your host, Martin Dorby. Now, let's get to the second part of Nigel Farage's conversation with the US Speaker Mike Johnson. And here they discuss what may be the transatlantic relationship's toughest week since the Suez Crisis, as President Trump threatens tariffs on European allies over the quandary of Greenland.
Look, on the world stage, I thought taking out Maduro, great, enemy of the West, no question. I think the verbal support that President Trump has given to those in Iran looking to topple this appalling theocratic regime, I completely understand and support that. The trouble is, taking out the enemies of the West is one thing. Alienating other members of the West who've been your best allies is quite another. And by the way, I get it. I get it about Greenland. I get it about the ice caps melting. I get it that, the high north is a risk area. But let's be frank. Friends can disagree in private, and that's fine. And that's part of life, part of politics. But to have a US president threatening tariffs, unless we agree that he can take over Greenland by some means, without, it seems, even getting the consent of the people of Greenland. I mean, this is a very hostile act. There's no other way I can put it.
Yes, the president has a certain manner in which he goes about doing things, and sometimes it's for the effect, the public effect, the shock and awe that is a means to an end.
This is the take him seriously but not literally stuff.
You've heard that phrase, and that's right. We take him seriously, not always literally, and I think he's okay with that. Whereas in America, the far left media, they take him always literally and not seriously, and I think that's their mistake. I think what the president has in mind with Greenland is he understands the strategic significance of that, the increasing significance, as you said. We all get it.
I get it.
That's the point, is that I think he wants all of our allies to get it. We face what I believe to be an increasing threat from China, Russia, Iran, and that is a strategic position there, the Arctic is, and it's not adequately protected in the president's view. And it's no slight to anyone.
But there's nothing to stop. OK, well, I get that. Yeah. There's nothing to stop American bases on Greenland. They're not going to stop you doing it.
Right.
I've listened to the arguments of Stephen Miller and others. Well, why should we? Why should we defend Greenland and not own it? But you know, there is this principle of the self-determination of peoples.
Sure.
It's the very thing you're celebrating with
that's right.
With this 250th anniversary. And I'm just arguing that you know, if Trump wanted a strong economic partnership with Greenland, and you know, you could look at rare earth minerals and all the other things that might come from it, but to threaten to use force, physical force, or economic force against your allies to get your own way, I mean, this does threaten. This does threaten NATO.
Yes.
And it threatens, and by the way, you know, many of these structures are imperfect, but basically, NATO's been quite a good anchor. Yes, of course, the Europeans haven't paid enough, and Trump's done well to get them to pay more. This is the biggest fracture in our relationship between our two countries since Suez in 1956. This is serious, and you're here about to speak before Parliament. I mean, is there nothing that can be done here?
Well, I'm here to encourage our friends and calm the situation. Maybe it's providential that I happen to be here right now. This was not planned.
I think it's been wrong luck for you, actually, hasn't it?
Well, it depends on how you look at it. Look, I think we're going to get beyond this little rift. I don't think it's a threat to NATO or to this special relationship that we have in the long run. The president greatly values NATO, and in fact, to your point, he's done more for NATO than anyone in history. I mean, the fact that everyone has agreed to go to 5% of GDP as their commitment for this security concern is a very important development, and it would not have happened but for President Trump. I think he has deserved the Nobel Peace Prize. He's ended 7 or 8 conflicts and wars around the globe.
He seems very keen on that.
He does, and it's well earned. In fact, there's a number of persons of my colleagues, speakers from parliaments around the world, who will be nominating him jointly, I think, for the next Nobel Peace Prize. But this issue in Greenland, I think, should not be a disruption to all of that. I think we'll get past this. I do.
Well, let's hope we do get past it. Otherwise, it genuinely would be a rupture. And if he's so concerned about security, and you yourself talking about the growing threat from the Chinese Communist Party, let alone other aggressors that exist in the world, there's one thing I can't understand. Diego Garcia in the Chagos Islands, described to me by a very senior Republican as America's most important military base in the world outside the homeland. And there you are with Africa, the Middle East, India, strategically the most incredible place. For some extraordinary reason, the British government has listened to a non-binding judgment from a UN court and has decided we're going to give it to Mauritius, who never had sovereignty over it in the first place. We're going to pay for the privilege to do so. There is no protection under this treaty for the Chinese or others to get close to Diego Garcia, to start spying. And we're not just talking about aeroplanes here, we're talking submarines, we're talking nuclear capability. I don't understand why America has not been more forthright in saying this is a bad idea.
It's a good question. I share your concern in general. It's obviously a very important location for us and for the UK. We recognize that. I don't know that the president has spoken directly to the issue or as forcefully enough, to your point, but I would assume that he shares the same concern as you and I do about that. I've spoken to him about this particular issue. I talk to him sometimes, multiple times a day, but this one hasn't come up.
Yeah.
We've had a lot going on.
Well, I accept that. No, I completely accept that.
Sure.
And you've had so many priorities, but don't let this one go, because I'm genuinely worried. I also think in terms of the special relationship, us giving you the use of Diego Garcia is one of the most important things that we give you.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Well, it's been a long 250-year, well, longer than that, but 250-year history of the two nations. I think you're going to get a very good welcome here in London, despite the current rifts and the current difficulties. And look, I want to say, Mike, thank you coming in, being so diplomatic. But yeah, you've come at a very, very tricky time. Well done.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
In a moment's time, we'll be debating all of the Speaker's comments there. Everything from free speech to the Greenland tariff, or that could be the biggest threat to the transatlantic alliance in a generation. That's next.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there. Storm Harry, named by the Spanish Met Service, will bring some heavy rain, thunderstorms, strong winds to central parts of the Mediterranean over the next few days. Dry across Turkey and Greece on Tuesday, but rather chilly. Wet weather across Italy into the Balearics and then eastern Spain as well. Some snow over the higher ground. Dry towards Madeira, down into the Canaries, Tenerife, there 18 degrees, sunny spells, where it remains warm over the next few days here.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations Forecast.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock, only on GB News.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience, because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country. There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor. Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m. only on GB News.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pearce.
And me, Miriam Cates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back to GB News Tonight. Now, we just heard the Speaker of the House of Representatives, second in line to the presidency, third in line, giving his take on everything from President Trump's latest tariff threats over Greenland to the brewing diplomatic row over the UK's clampdown on free speech. Well, joining me now to discuss this for some reaction is the former advisor to Barack Obama, that is Spencer Critchley. Spencer, it's always a pleasure to have your company. I want to get your take specifically on the big topic of the day, and that is Donald Trump's position on Greenland. Even Nigel Farage there being, by my record, easily the most outspoken and kind of contradictory towards Donald Trump's position thus far.
Sure, and I want to emphasize I was an advisor to Barack Obama's campaigns, not to him personally. Yeah, you know, I disagree with Nigel Farage about all kinds of things, but I think that he made a very good point about Greenland there. All of this talk about either purchasing Greenland, presumably in Trump's mind by bribing its people. Apparently one of his ideas is to individually pay Greenlanders to surrender their freedom, or through force, which he explicitly does not rule out, is not only, you know, morally wrong, it's insane. It's insane even if your only metric is the self-interest of the United States. This kind of action we can see has already made the United States weaker, very seriously weaker, by quite understandably undermining the confidence of our closest allies. And the idea that somehow NATO's been exploiting the United States all these years, you know, we can certainly argue over contributions to defense budgets, etc. But the idea that NATO has somehow been exploiting the most powerful country in the history of the world, which has benefited so enormously from the post-war world order with NATO at its heart. Spencer, the idea that we would sacrifice the protection we get from NATO is insane.
Can I just put one point to you there from Speaker Johnson? And he said, we shouldn't take Donald Trump literally. We take him seriously, but we shouldn't take him literally. This is the politics of shock and awe. The notion that this extraordinary hand grenade of an idea is thrown out there, invasion, taking over by force, but that's not actually the real game plan. He wants a more diplomatic notion, but why not just go for the diplomatic notion in the first place?
This line about don't take him literally, take him seriously, but not literally, has long since worn out its welcome and certainly been disproven by the second Trump administration, if not the first. During the first Trump administration, he had what are often referred to as adults around him who could contain his worst impulses, but he learned his lesson, and this time he's stocked his government with infinitely pliant mediocrities like Johnson, and there are no limits on him. And so we should absolutely take him seriously, as we have seen just recently in Venezuela, as we're seeing on the streets of Minneapolis and other American cities, as we're seeing with all of this talk about Greenland. And I think that the leaders and defense ministers of Europe and Great Britain are obviously taking him seriously, not because they're fools, but because they understand exactly what they're looking at and exactly what the risk is.
OK, thank you for joining us on the show tonight. It's a pleasure to have your company. As ever, that's a former advisor of the Barack Obama campaign, Spencer Critchley. Thank you for your time. Get some reaction in the studio now. I'm joined by the Republican commentator and the spokesperson, Nora Lee Knotson, as well as the journalist and broadcaster. My studio buddy tonight, Matthew Stadlen. Nora Lee, let's start with you first. Do you think Donald Trump has got it wrong on Greenland?
I think what he's gotten right is that it's very strategic and very important to our national security and NATO's national security. In terms of his style, I agree. The style is very... it's a very negative approach. But I think Donald Trump was upset because they were in negotiations with Denmark and Greenland. And then suddenly some of the allies send troops to Greenland. So he saw that as aggressive. And so this was his response to it. And what he's really wanting the allies to do is focus on getting peace between Russia and the Ukraine. And he's actually reiterated that today, if they would spend more time focusing on that and actually driving Russia back into a relationship with the West, driving it away from China, because China is truly the adversary that he's concerned with.
But if Donald Trump wanted to have a bridge or a barrier between Russia, China and the West, He could do what China have done in Africa. He could go and diplomatically woo Greenland. He could make them generous offers of multi-billions of dollars, offer to share the spoils of mineral wealth. He could do it in a diplomatic way, not threats of invasion.
I agree, and I think this will be solved diplomatically 100% because we're not dealing with Venezuela here. We're dealing with Greenland. So we will be able to put commercial terms in place so that we can develop the resources and we can set up all the bases that we need there to have our security. But I think this is Trump being upset at how Europe is dealing with trying to solve Russia-Ukraine and then treating the U.S. like it's the enemy.
Matthew Sadler, I want to bring you now on the thorny topic, of course, of free speech, one that's kind of consistently popping up. We heard there Speaker Johnson saying it would be a detriment to the UK to ban X, and he there underlines the point that freedom of speech is in peril in the United Kingdom.
I think Nigel Farage is insulting the very considerable intelligence of GBNews viewers by claiming that there is a clampdown on free speech in this country, when at the very same time he wants to be the next Prime Minister of this country, and he has his own television show on a national network and a television show in which he is then able to undermine government policy, specifically on the Chagos Islands, to one of our allies, in this case, Speaker Johnson. This is just a complete myth that there... Exactly, Martin.
He was talking about people going to prison for tweets. It is the essence of free speech. More people have been imprisoned in Britain for social media posts than in Russia.
It is the essence of free speech, of which he is a primary beneficiary. On the issue of Greenland, let me just... You talk about the emotions of Trump. This is a man, or supposedly, who is the most powerful human on the planet, the leader of arguably the greatest democracy on the planet. He shouldn't be acting emotionally. He said in a letter to Norway that we found out about today that as a consequence of him not getting the Nobel Peace Prize, and I am now quoting him, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace. I'm laughing because this is the behaviour of a man-child, but I shouldn't be laughing because it is the very, very dangerous behaviour of a man-child. This is a momentous rift, the like of which I don't think has happened in my lifetime between our great allies in America and ourselves and our European partners. You do not use, to use your words, the tactics of shock and awe with your allies, and you do not threaten a trade war with your closest allies. It is disgraceful, and it, as a parent, it is also deeply concerning about the future.
But Matthew, I would agree with you. It's not very statesmanly-like, but we know that is not Trump's style. So everything he says must be in context.
Guys, thank you very much, but I have to move on, Nora Lee. Matthew, superb stuff. Now, with respect to the Chagos deal, a Foreign Office spokesperson has told GB News this. Despite all these increasingly desperate attempts to undermine the UK's agreements with Mauritius, the truth remains that this deal is essential to secure the operations of the joint US-UK base on Diego Garcia for future generations, which is why it has been supported by all our Five Eyes partners and why it continues to be the right outcome for Britain's national security. Now, and on the Chinese embassy, the government said this: national security is our first duty, and government security experts have been involved throughout the process so far. Now, up next is Jacob Rees-Mogg, State of the Nation. So, Jacob, what's on your menu?
Well, we're going to be obviously talking about Greenland. This is the worst crisis in Anglo-American relations since 1956, since Suez, since Eisenhower threatened to run on the pound to stop a UK independent foreign policy. It is really serious, and it's a reminder of what Palmerston said: we have no perpetual friends and no eternal enemies. It's our interests that are perpetual. America is sometimes on our side and sometimes isn't, but you can never rely on foreign countries. Britain always needs to make its own way in the world and must think about other alliances, and must start thinking about whether India will be an important alliance, and we must think about whether we must always follow America's lead in foreign policy.
OK, so Jacob Rees-Mogg, superbly put as ever. Up next to Jacob Rees-Mogg. See you tomorrow, 3 till 6.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Cloudy throughout tonight for most of us, some rain across northern areas, and by tomorrow morning it will become pretty windy across western areas. That's as an area of low pressure is developing out in the Atlantic. That will bring some strong winds into Tuesday, but before then a weakening weather front brings further outbreaks of rain to more northern areas into this evening. Some of these heavy at times, just turn a little bit drier and clearer for a time across Wales, southern parts of England too, with heavy bursts of rain continuing across Scotland. With clear skies pretty limited, frost is also going to be fairly limited to start Tuesday. Just the far north of Scotland could see temperatures just below zero, but a relatively mild start for the time of year to come for Tuesday. But the winds will strengthen. We could see gusts in excess of 65 miles per hour through Tuesday across parts of West Wales, Devon and Cornwall. A breezy picture elsewhere across the rest of the UK, but a brighter